Brace yourselves, retail apocalypse approaching. Buckle up, shoppers, because the retail world as we know it is teetering on the brink. A perfect storm is brewing, and it's not a sale on discount patio furniture. Major players like Walmart, Ikea, and Home Depot are staring down the barrel of a crisis, and it all boils down to one thing: getting stuff from point A to point B. That's right, folks, we're talking about the supply chain, and things are about to get messy. Picture this: empty shelves, delayed deliveries, and frustrated shoppers. Not exactly the makings of a holly jolly holiday season. So what's the culprit behind this impending retail meltdown? In a word, strikes. And not just any strikes, we're talking about a potential shutdown of major ports along the East Coast. Remember how much we all love to complain about shipping delays? Well, those minor inconveniences could soon morph into full-blown retail nightmares. This isn't just about delayed gratification, it's about a potential economic earthquake that could shake the foundations of American retail. Fasten your seatbelts, everyone, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. The East Coast stands still, unpacking the port strike. Let's zoom in on the epicenter of this retail earthquake, the East Coast ports. These bustling hubs are the lifeblood of American commerce, funneling in a staggering amount of goods from around the globe. But right now, those arteries are at risk of being choked off. Why? Because the workers responsible for keeping those ports humming, the dockworkers, the longshoremen, the folks who quite literally keep the wheels of commerce turning, are fed up. Years of grueling hours, stagnant wages, and increasing automation have pushed them to a breaking point, and they're demanding change. We're talking better pay, improved working conditions, and a greater say in how their industry is run. And they're willing to fight for it, even if it means bringing those massive cargo ships to a standstill. But here's the kicker: their demands are entirely reasonable. These workers are the backbone of our economy, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. The problem is their fight for fairness could have some pretty unpleasant ripple effects for the rest of us. Shifting seas, shifting fortunes, why alternate routes won't cut it. Now you might be thinking, hey, if the East Coast is clogged up, why not just reroute those ships to the West Coast, or maybe give our neighbors up north a little extra business? Sounds like a simple solution, right? Well, not so fast. Here's why those seemingly obvious workarounds are about as effective as using a teaspoon to bail out the Titanic. First off, the West Coast ports are already operating at near capacity. They're dealing with their own set of challenges, from labor shortages to aging infrastructure, and they simply don't have the bandwidth to absorb a sudden influx of cargo. It's like trying to cram a whole family's worth of luggage into a clown car. It ain't happening. As for our Canadian friends, well, they're lovely people, but their ports are facing many of the same limitations. Plus, rerouting ships to Canada would mean navigating a whole other set of regulations, tariffs, and logistical hurdles, a bureaucratic nightmare that would make even the most seasoned importer tear their hair out. Truckers take the wheel, navigating the rerouting roadblock. Let's not forget about the unsung heroes of the supply chain, the truckers. These road warriors are the ones responsible for getting those goods from the ports to our doorsteps, and they're already stretched thin as it is. Rerouting shipments to different ports would mean longer hauls, increased fuel costs, and even more time away from their families for these modern-day nomads. And guess what? Truckers aren't exactly jumping for joy at the prospect. They've been dealing with their own set of challenges for years: low wages, long hours, and a lack of respect, and they're not about to shoulder the burden of this crisis alone. Many truckers are already feeling the pinch of rising fuel costs and increased competition, and they're understandably wary of any changes that could further erode their already thin profit margins. So, while rerouting might seem like a logical solution on paper, in reality, it's a logistical and human nightmare. Empty shelves, empty stomachs, products feeling the pinch. Now let's talk about the real-world consequences of this impending supply chain meltdown. What does it actually mean for everyday consumers? Well, get ready for some sticker shock at the grocery store. Remember those avocados you love so much? Yeah, those are probably coming from Mexico, and they're going to get a whole lot more expensive if they can even make it to your local supermarket. And how about that new flat-screen TV you've been eyeing? Those components are likely coming from overseas, and they could be stuck in a shipping container purgatory for the foreseeable future. We're talking about delays, shortages, and price hikes on everything from electronics and clothing to furniture and auto parts. voices from the front lines, trucker tales, and retail woes. It's easy to get bogged down in the abstract talk of supply chains and logistics, but let's not forget about the human cost of this crisis. We talk to truckers who are facing impossible choices, spend even more time away from their families to make ends meet, or risk losing their livelihoods altogether. We heard from retail workers who are already bearing the brunt of customers' frustrations, dealing with empty shelves, delayed shipments, and the constant fear of being laid off. These are real people with real lives who are being impacted by this crisis, and their stories deserve to be heard. One trucker, a seasoned veteran of the open road, told us, "I love what I do, but it's getting harder and harder to make a living. We're the ones who keep this country moving, but it feels like nobody cares." A retail worker we spoke to echoed that sentiment, saying, "We're on the front lines dealing with the anger and frustration of customers who can't get what they need. It's stressful, it's exhausting, and it feels like it's only going to get worse." Crystal ball gazing expert predictions on the disruption's fallout. So, how long will this retail apocalypse last? Well, the experts aren't exactly painting a rosy picture. Some economists predict that the disruptions could last for months, potentially bleeding into the holiday shopping season and wreaking havoc on an already fragile economy. Others warn that the long-term consequences could be even more severe, leading to increased inflation, job losses, and a fundamental shift in how we consume goods. The consensus seems to be that this is not a short-term blip, but a systemic crisis that requires long-term solutions. As one industry analyst put it, we're at a tipping point. If we don't address the underlying issues that led to this crisis, worker exploitation, income inequality, and a lack of investment in infrastructure, we're going to see more and more disruptions like this in the future. Bracing for impact, the economic domino effect. The potential economic fallout of this crisis extends far beyond the walls of big-box stores. When goods stop flowing freely, the entire economy takes a hit. Manufacturers face production slowdowns, businesses struggle to meet demand, and consumers feel the pinch in their wallets. This can lead to a vicious cycle of decreased spending, job losses, and a decline in overall economic activity. The longer the disruption lasts, the more severe the consequences become. We're talking about a potential recession, folks, and it's not something to be taken lightly. Beyond the bottom-line societal implications of the supply chain squeeze, this crisis isn't just about dollars and cents, it's about the very fabric of our society. When people can't access the basic goods they need, it creates anxiety, frustration, and a sense of unease. This can lead to social unrest, political instability, and a decline in overall well-being. We're already seeing signs of this with rising tensions between consumers, businesses, and government officials. The longer this crisis drags on, the more likely it is to exacerbate existing social and political divides. Weathering the storm, potential solutions, and long-term strategies. So what can be done to avert this impending disaster? Well, it's going to take a concerted effort from all stakeholders, businesses, government, and consumers to find sustainable solutions. In the short term, that means investing in infrastructure improvements, streamlining regulations, and finding ways to improve working conditions and wages for truckers and port workers. In the long term, we need to rethink our entire approach to global trade. That means diversifying our supply chains, reducing our reliance on just-in-time inventory systems, and finding ways to produce more goods domestically. It also means addressing the root causes of worker exploitation and income inequality that have led us to this point. A call to action: consumers, companies, and the future of retail. This crisis is a wake-up call. It's time to stop taking our supply chains for granted and start demanding a more just and sustainable system. Consumers can do their part by supporting businesses that prioritize ethical sourcing and fair labor practices. Companies need to step up and invest in their workers, their communities, and the environment. And our elected officials need to enact policies that promote fair trade, protect workers' rights, and invest in the infrastructure we need to thrive. The future of retail, and indeed the future of our economy, depends on it.